Appreciate you joining me today. It is May 19th. We are in the Psalms today. We're going to be looking in Psalm 79. Our reading today is actually Psalm 79 through 82, but we'll just be looking at Psalm 79. Verse 1. O God, the nations have come into your inheritance. Your holy temple they have defiled. They have laid Jerusalem in heaps. And so that is the situation, that we're speaking of destruction. And like most times, we know why destruction came, because God gave them over, because they had not been obeying God. And so here's a cry for help, a cry to God for help. And the question from perhaps God's perspective is, why? Why should I do this? And this psalm, I think, helps us to see the reasons why, or at least to think about it a little bit. You might look down at verse 5. How long, O Lord, will you be angry forever? Will your jealousy burn like fire? Pour out your wrath on the nations that do not know you, and on the kingdoms that do not call on your name, for they have devoured Jacob. Verse 8 now. O do not remember former iniquities against us. Let your tender mercies come speedily to meet us, for we have been brought very low. Help us, O God of our salvation, for the glory of your name, and deliver us and provide atonement for our sins, for your name's sake. And this is the truth of it, that there are multiple facets to this plea, or at least 2 or 3 facets. But one is, please provide atonement for our sins, and that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And as Israel, as Jerusalem was in heaps, they had to recognize their own sin, that God had given them over because of their own sin. It wasn't because the nations that had come against them were righteous. It's because Israel, that was called to be righteous, was not righteous. And they had greatly provoked God. And they're confessing. This psalm is a confession of sin, and a plea for mercy, and a plea for grace. Please provide atonement for our sin. God, please be merciful to us sinners, that we depend upon God's grace and mercy. Absolutely. That He provides. To think about that, one of the names of God is God will provide. And Abraham, when he takes Isaac up on Mount Moriah, and the lad says, where's the sacrifice? And Abraham says, God will provide. And God did provide. God provided His Son. Please make atonement for our sins. Provide atonement for our sins. And that is what the Lord did. But now back in the passage, look at verse 10. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Let there be known among the nations in our sight the avenging of the blood of your servants which has been shed. Let the groaning of the prisoner come before you according to the greatness of your power. Preserve those who are appointed to die, and return to our neighbors sevenfold into their bosom their reproach, which they have reproached you, O Lord. So it's not just please provide atonement for our sins, but it's also those who have come against Jerusalem. They are also enemies of God. And this psalm, the psalmist is saying, do you hear what they're saying about you? About you, O God, that they are actually, where is their God? Well, their God is in heaven. But this is what the enemies are saying. Think back upon Moses at Mount Sinai, and when God says, let my wrath burn, and Moses says, what are your enemies going to say? That He's just brought them out of Egypt just to kill them in the wilderness? Just to kill them? And the Lord at that point turns away. It's one of the occasions where it says He repents. His wrath was turned away by Moses' plea. But the psalmist is somewhat saying the same thing. Why should the nations say, "Where is their God?" And so the plea is not just to provide atonement for our sins, but it's also return to our neighbors sevenfold into their bosom their reproach which they have reproached you, O Lord. They are speaking against you. They are denigrating your name. They are lifting up their gods, the Ashtoreths, the Molechs, the Babylonian gods. They're elevating those at your expense. They're casting you down. So please provide atonement for our sins, but also do this for your enemy's sake, in that they are speaking against you. And in doing this, notice what it says, verse 9. And deliver us and provide atonement for our sins for your name's sake. So the psalmist is saying, do this for our sakes, for our enemies' sakes, and ultimately for your own sake. Verse 13, so we, your people, and the sheep of your pasture, will give you thanks forever. We will show forth your praise to all generations. That God, if you'll do this, if you will listen to our plea, if you will be merciful to us, and if you will judge in righteousness, then you will be magnified, you will be glorified, and we will praise you. We will praise you. And that you will be glorified in all of this for your own name's sake, that you have done this, that your hand has been in all this. And so the psalm is written. Jerusalem was in heaps. It was a great destruction. And you have this cry for mercy, this cry for justice, and this cry so that God would be magnified. And we do the same. We do the same. So, hope this brief look into this psalm has been helpful for you today. Appreciate you. Hope you're having a good day, and we'll see you in our next study.